OpsTok, Thought Leadership and Technology in Operations, with your hosts Sahand and Tom. Special guest Darren Mark, leader in driving sustainable manufacturing, Executive Director of Rhino Equity Group.
Hey everybody, and welcome to OpsTok, where we dive deep into the world of manufacturing, logistics, supply chain, industrial companies, interviewing highly accomplished operators and owners with your hosts, Sahand and Tom. My pleasure to talk to Darren Mark of the Rhino Equity Group of companies today. Super excited. Darren's an old friend and a client of ours at Integral, and just an all-around really amazing person that we'll get a chance to talk to today. And he comes with a rich background of operational excellence, operations turnarounds, all sorts of really exciting things to talk about today. So thank you, Darren, for sparing the time for us, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome. Let's just get started with a little bit of just an overall, how did you get into Rhino, and then we'll take it from there, because it's just such an awesome story.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess since I hit my own career, even before I did my master's, I was trying out entrepreneurial stints with different people, and when I started working in a group of manufacturing companies, which was really my calling, I had done my master's in manufacturing engineering and management down at the University of New South Wales in Australia. And when I came back, I ended up, it took time because it was the recession, but I landed a job with a group of manufacturing companies. And through that period of time, doing plant turnarounds, I was doing, some, I guess you could say, some organizational efforts on the side to try to get different companies going, like a company that I either owned or co-owned or partnered, whatever it was. And we tried to put together a group that was going to do plant turnarounds, actually, a consultant group, and even went up to Sudbury, looked at mining companies to do plant turnarounds, that kind of stuff. And tried a few other, let's just say we tried anything, which takes a lot of effort, because when you're working 50-hour weeks anyway, plus, and then on the side, you're trying to meet with other people to develop partnerships or networks, whatever it is, then you're kind of completely immersed in that, in the whole idea of starting a company. So we spent the next 2 years doing business cases 8 hours a day, either a Saturday or a Sunday, almost without fail. We were meeting. So it was like a 6-day work week. We added that one day in to try to build our company. And when we decided we wanted to start buying companies instead of being an entrepreneur, like starting from scratch, because we thought there was a lot of risk in that, and we kind of came to the conclusion that we're operators, we're not necessarily entrepreneurs, although it ended up being a little bit of both.
I was going to say, you are one of the best entrepreneurs I've got a chance to interact with. So yeah, definitely qualify there.
Ended up being both, yeah. So when we started looking at companies, and we always had, I just want to mention, we always had a very open way of approaching all of these topics. Like, just as an example, when we were the one day, and we pivoted fast, the one day we were like, okay, let's buy companies. What companies are we going to buy? Manufacturing companies. Okay. And we talked about that for like 4 or 5 hours. And then it was everyone go out and figure out your best way to find a manufacturing company to buy. So people went and cold called, people went and talked to accounting firms, law firms, whatever it was, brokers. And we just came back and learned from each other's experiences. We weren't like, hey, everyone's got to do this. It was everyone do what you think is best and come back. And that's really how we work together. And the other thing that was very important about that group is that everyone did what they said they were going to do. No one, like, everyone always showed up, everyone made the phone calls, everyone put in the effort. And that's when we knew we had really good energy. It just kept on building. And then we ended up buying Marble Industries in December 2014. So, that was kind of our pilot project. We bought it for $850,000, partnered with the BDC, pooled our money in. So no investors on that one. We probably put together like 250 grand and the rest was BDC. Small company, right? Revenuing like 1.1, 1.2, 20 employees or so, 15 to 20 employees. So I jumped out and of my day job and started running that as president. And Todd was the VP of sales, marketing, customer service, customer experience, basically. And we had a good run of that for the next couple of years. We ran that until April of 2017 when we acquired Erpina, which was a huge jump up from an acquisition of, basically $1 million to an acquisition of 18 million. And then it was December of 2018 that we bought Euroline Windows out in British Columbia. And then it was July 2021 that we bought Permacorp, which is in Edmonton. And those three companies, the ones that we bought, are like after Marbella, are all around the same size. So, we bought them revenuing around 20 million, Permacorp quite a bit less actually, but now they all revenue around 30 million. So that gives kind of an idea of the scope. Our revenue now is close to 100 million. But it's been that's basically how we developed Rhino, but it's been a rough ride. It's been a lot of challenges along the way. Sounds easy when you say it in a summary, but yeah.
So Darren, that first manufacturing company you bought, like from a personal experience, what was it like? And then how did it influence the future acquisitions that you had?
So Marbella was the perfect first acquisition in terms of proving capability. It's 20,000 square feet. You probably have 30 different stations of woodworking. And it's like a sole proprietorship. So you basically, me as president, I was also running the floor. I was fixing the machinery. I was worried about APs, ARs. Every aspect of the business, Todd and I basically covered off. There were no managers. We had like an office admin and that was it, right? We put in some salespeople eventually and stuff like that. Grew it, I think 30% over the first 2 years. But it was totally, like, compared to what I was used to doing plant turnarounds, it was totally doable. I was very confident in being able to run it. The issue only came in once in a while when I had to try to fix machinery that was beyond my knowledge and trying to do that on the spot when the production shut down, or you're there till 11 o'clock at night with your head in a dust collector or trying to figure out electronics on some CNC, and that stuff's really annoying. So I luckily I had a friend at the time that was working as a troubleshooter at Chrysler. Whenever their lines went down, he was the guy that was in there and had to get it going. So in a pinch, I'd known him since we were young. He came over and helped me out. And it's funny because I could spend 3 hours trying to troubleshoot this thing, and 15 minutes later he has it running. So
that impact the other companies you started acquiring, like having that hands-on experience fixing machines when they break down. So when you're looking at companies, did you look at them differently after that experience of running it personally?
I mean, I think just to get it out there, I guess my personality whenever I was running a plant was I had to be able to do every process better than anyone else at that plant, hands down. And if someone wanted to challenge me on it, like for fun, if someone wanted to challenge me on it, then we could just go do that, right? So if ever even the most skilled person couldn't make it to work, I could be bending shapes for windows, I could be cutting glass, I could be programming CNCs. It didn't really matter, right? And I had a lot of interest in that stuff. So when it came to running the other companies, I think that it's just, you have to be able to decipher what is part of a culture that doesn't want to learn or doesn't want to take accountability versus, potentially a culture that just needs training. But you can kind of see through the BS, for lack of a better term. And look, anyone who works with me knows that I don't have a short temper. I'm like very positive. I do lots of like proper types of meetings and communication and that kind of stuff. But there comes a certain point at which it's like, okay, now we really just have to get past this issue, and we got to lay it out on the line, because there's a lot of issues in these companies that have been running, like, Marvell 1963. We have Irpina 1960, Euroline 1990. So there's a lot of just issues that have perpetuated within those companies for decades that no one has actually driven to the bottom of the root issue and solved, because they're tough, right? And so then you got to actually go through the process and finally solve it. So I guess, I don't know, in a roundabout way, my experiences heading into the other companies were really just that I had the confidence to tackle every aspect of the business. The only one I would say that I was weak at would be like ERP, right?
Well, but that's I was going to get there too. But the most interesting thing about, like, what was some of the most challenging or the most fundamental challenges you faced with any of these companies, but like, pick one or two that you remember, because you mentioned culture and some things, that root causes that were just like kind of ignored for decades, and it sort of plays into the culture. But how do you go about identifying it? How do you drill down and get to the bottom of it? I know in conversations between you and I in the past, you talked about walking the floor and stuff like that. But I'm curious to kind of learn how, in some of the most challenging situations, how you've been able to identify it. And then I'd love to hear, I'm sure our viewers would love to hear how you go about, okay, now we know, how do we make change?
Yeah. If I had a lot of time, I'd tell you this African parable that talks about, like, if this prince wants to become a prince in time, he's got to learn to hear the forest without even, talking to the animal. You've got to, so awesome. It's like, basically, I usually start by talking to every single person in the company as long as they want to talk. Because before you get into the company, and it's funny because we had like operational consultants, et cetera, that were like, what are you going to do when you get an Irpina? And they drill you for like 5 hours because you're doing a deal with the bank and they're giving you a lot of money and all that stuff. But what I could do was prove that I knew what I would, like, sound like I knew what I was doing, but I couldn't give him a definitive, answer on what I'm actually going to do. But what I do is I get in there and I talk to every person, because everyone wants to complain by and large about what's happening. And some people you have to draw that complaint out because you want to hear it, right? You want to hear about all their issues. And then some people will just go for it. And I have all the patience in the world for that. It does take a lot of patience, but I remember some plant turnarounds where I would go through every single person. Some people would want to talk for 45 minutes about all of their issues. Some people would want to talk for an hour, and you just have to listen, make notes. And that really draws out more than just, what time motion studies are going to get for you, right? Sure, you can do status quo time motion studies, which everyone should do, and then figure out how much they're improving and all that kind of stuff. But from a cultural perspective, that's really it. And then when it comes to just, the processes on the floor, it's just observation. And I know that sounds so easy, but like, it's just, you got to watch people and just say, does this make sense at all? Right. And try to get the flow on the production floor. And maybe that is the thing that I was just born with, or my dad taught me. I don't know what happened, but that's something that I just have, I think, to a certain extent as a gift. Like, when I'm on the production floor, the flow is everything that I have my focus on, and everything else is just affecting that, basically.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're basically in with the matrix of the operations on the factory flow. No, that, and by the way, I've done engineering just like yourself, and I think Tom too. And there's some things like physics, flow, things piling up. Some of these things the theory is one thing, but then seeing it in action, you really start grasping it. But what you have that I've seen, Darren, is that not only the theoretical physics and engineering background, and then you've got the, hands-on, and you've seen it in many, many different plants. And then you've got this amazing vision of how it could be that is fairly unique, right? And that's every time we talk about some of the things that you have in mind and the vision of how it could be, whether it's using technology or systems or really, beyond that, it's a pretty unique set that allows you to be so effective at what you do within the Rhino group, which is awesome. So thanks for sharing that. I'm going to follow up at some point about the proverb that you shared. That was awesome. So send it to me afterwards so that we can put it in the show notes. Definitely.
Yeah.
It's and links to it if you have.
Yeah, just a note on that. I think it's just what you said is very, very powerful. I really, really believe, and especially with middle and upper management, that if you can get them to visualize where you want to be very, very strongly, like, what happens is they start to realize that where you are is crazy. And then everyone is gunning towards where you want to be. Like if you want to use a square wheel, and that's been happening for a long, long time, and you want to move to a round wheel, then it's like, just describe in detail, like, and ad nauseum, until everyone's like, okay, I get it. I totally get, why are we even doing it like this? This is crazy. We shouldn't be doing a square wheel, right? And that is often like, we do a gap analysis like all the time if I just want to get people's heads wrapped around it.
So Darren, one of the things that really resounded with me when you were talking about your approach is that you have a very passionate and personal care towards the employees and towards the companies you build. You can definitely feel that. Anybody that says they're going to come in and I'm going to listen as long as they need to talk, like that to me was really, really amazing. So tell me about the values surrounding Rhino. I've read that you are into high quality products, long lasting performance. You're keeping manufacturing local, but then you're also into wildlife preservation. Can you share us about your values?
Yeah, I'll just say that I really do care a lot about our employees. The issue that we're dealing with right now is that we have over 400 employees, or around 400 employees. So it's almost impossible to, have a personal relationship with all of them. So that becomes a difficult, inflection point or kind of limit. You really have to have amazing leaders, and I think for the most part we do, but that's always an ongoing challenge, right? Is who are the executives, who are the VPs? That's so key, and we've been learning more and more about that whole world in the last year, because we just can't run all these companies anymore. So anyway, yeah, just to note on that. In terms of our values, I mean, for me, this goes way back. My dad got diagnosed with cancer when I was 17. He died when I was 21. It was like a long, hard battle that had a huge impact on my life. And emotionally, I was in a really rough spot. I actually flunked out of second year university at Western doing physics. And then I thought to myself, I've got to use this to develop what my value system is, basically, because I'm at the bottom now. And you know what they say is, like, either when you're at the top or when you're at the bottom, you figure out what your value system is, right? And to me, it really revolved around the environment. Because there's also, I'm going to butcher this, but there's an amazing, from an Aboriginal or a Native chief, there's this amazing saying of, basically, if we don't learn to respect the beasts in our world, like, the incredible animals and stuff, then we can't respect ourselves, basically. I guess other symbols of that have stuck with me in life, and to kind of bolster that, that's when I joined LEAD, not long after that whole thing, when I was a couple years into working at the group of manufacturing companies. And LEAD International is LEAD for Leadership for Environment and Development. And basically, it's about 90 different countries around the world that train mid-level management in all different sectors to try to get sustainability initiatives going within their organization. So it could be within political or not-for-profit or for-profit or whatever it was. So, you know, I was obviously the outlier, as you were saying, Tom, being in industrial, being in manufacturing, and going after this whole sustainability thing. But I was thinking to myself, this is like the best place to be, because it's often the place that needs it the most, right? Especially in building products. And so anyway, I did train with people from all over the world, as I said, 90 different countries. And you really get a feel for how the North American countries are impacting some of the third world countries, like in Africa, in terms of our carbon footprint. And really, it doesn't affect us in our environment, but it totally affects what's happening there. And there's a ton of, you know, there's more biodiversity in South Africa, just that country, than the whole Northern Hemisphere. So it's like all of these things start to come together, not to mention human rights and all that kind of stuff, of course, with being in South Africa. Those kinds of, you know, those kinds of things really had a huge impact on me. And so when we went to start up Rhino just became a serendipitous name. It was just, we were sitting outside of a company one day. We were going to head inside. We had a terrible name at that time. It was an acronym of all of our first names. It was TADA. But we were like, we're going to keep this terrible name until we come up with an amazing name, not just an okay name, an amazing name. So we thought Rhino was amazing, and it really aligned with our value system. We donate to 2 different rhino preservation, like protection organizations. One's in London, one's in Texas, I'm pretty sure. And they do work worldwide, wherever the need is most, to try to protect rhinos. And in terms of the values of the companies, I mean, it's getting away from a disposable, like a disposable product, basically a kitchen or windows or railing systems, whatever you have, that are only going to last 5-10 years. When I was in the group of companies before we started Rhino, we were doing replacement windows. And the typical way that those companies would function is that they would replace the builder windows that were in a home. So you build a home, you put in the cheapest windows possible, because that keeps down the cost of the home. And then 5 years later, you replace them with a whole new set of windows. It's the most ridiculous thing. So, and the same thing can go for millwork as well, right? You go into the house and then it's terrible millwork. We have customers that have had, you know, Euroline windows for almost as long as the company has been around, like 25 years, and they look as good and operate as well as the day that they were installed. Same with the kitchens. You know, when we go over to friends' houses for fun, we check the drawer, see if it says Erpini on the inside. These things last for a long, long time. The only reason to uninstall them is if someone thought the design was out of date, like the look was out of date or something like that. And same thing goes for Permacorp. You know, we have a lot of work to do in terms of the product life cycle for the items that we uninstall. So deconstruction, right? And I've joined some forums on that. You know, when you uninstall vinyl windows, where does that go? When you uninstall an old kitchen, where does that go?
That's great. Darren, one thing you mentioned within the context that I wanted to come back to, because it just was key for me, is the values are just amazing. You know, long-lasting products is something that is hopefully to be celebrated more and more in North America. I think for decades we've kind of gone towards the use it once and variety over durability. So, you know, we can definitely talk about that for a while, because I'm a big believer in that. It's, you know, I'm a big believer in the quality of work we do as engineers, manufacturers in North America and Canada and the US. Other parts of the world do really well too, but I certainly can vouch for our work here. But what I wanted to go to was a little bit of what you said about the companies growing beyond your a personal or your group's circle of management, and you have to sort of go identify the new leaders. What like that must be a challenge right now. And how have you traditionally solved this problem? And what are some words of wisdom you can share with us on that?
Oh man, if I had the wisdom. I gotta say that we're newbies at that, and this is where what we're going through kind of is analogous to entrepreneurs, because it actually feels like the entrepreneur that doesn't want to back away from the business, right, in certain ways. And me and my partners, we have a really wide breadth of perspective on these kinds of things. We have kind of our more conservative partners, and then our more risk-taking and liberal partners. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle, but the guys that are more risk-taking are like, let's get somebody in there, let's let them run it and all that, and the other guys are a little bit more, no, we got to keep hands-on kind of thing. And so we always come to good conclusions, agreements, all that kind of stuff, but that area has been a tough one. Especially Arpenia is really difficult to run. It's not like any other company. You have custom products going down the line, and just to give you an idea, they're not based on SKUs. You could have 1,000 SKUs or 10,000 SKUs going into a car, fine, but what if those things change shape and changed attributes based on their size and based on parametric equations, basically? So you imagine the complexity of that. And that's why, as Sahan knows, it's so tough to get an ERP into that kind of place. But what we did, coming back to the leadership thing, I think probably Euroline is the best example we have at this point. I was running that for a couple of years, and then in late 2019, I ran it for 1 year. I was out there over 100 days in 2019 when we acquired it. So I was CEO president, and then knew that was unsustainable, especially in my fiance's eyes. So I decided we would run a process. So I reached out to my friend Justin Pintuala, who's a really good executive headhunter, also manages a portfolio of companies with his family, and he actually downloaded his whole methodology to us in terms of how he does recruitment. And we had at that point in time a director of HR across the companies, and her and I talked about it. We ran the whole thing, and it brought it down to, I guess, 4 candidates. And then the way that we ran that part, and I think this is probably the most critical thing, and I've heard other companies do it, but I think it's so important. There's a couple tricks that we do use that work, is that that person would come in, I talk to them for about a half hour, try to chill them out, because you really want them to be themselves. You don't want them to be the perfect, hey, I'm here for this interview. Right. You don't want to be selling each other on each other per se. You want the real candidate, right? And then they would go for a plant tour with our director of manufacturing, Jimmy. And then after that, when they come back into the boardroom, I would have my top 3 managers there, like finance, operations, logistics, and I would just watch them chat for the next half hour, 45 minutes, and they can ask each other whatever questions they want. And then you automatically, from that situation, get a feel of the chemistry between everybody. And I just observe. I rarely would say anything in that situation, because I'm not going to be there. Basically, it's how they work together. So after that, I would spend another half hour with the person. So the overall interview process at that stage was 3 hours or so. And then the final would be with me and my business partners on the Zoom call or whatever. So, but that ability to see them interact with the senior management and see how they troubleshoot or talk about issues together before even hiring somebody in, I think is very key. And we got an amazing guy out in DC. We actually basically let the senior management choose between him and another candidate. And and David Funk is just awesome. He came from California Closets, and he had his own business down in California, installing furniture.
David Funk is awesome. Love the guy, and we are gonna, hopefully, if he's open to it. I think he's already told me he's open to it. We're gonna have him on this show. Would love to have him because every time I interact with him, I learn something new. Whether it's manufacturing, business, life, everything. So I agree with you that the senior management and yourself did kudos to choosing.
I just thought that's an incredible story about getting to look at the candidates and how they would interact with their future team. I think that's just a really brilliant move that a lot of business owners can definitely utilize. So thank you for sharing that. I know for me, it was always the plant tour was like the way that I would get the person to relax and to really try to get them in their natural element. And I think similar, Darren, to what you were saying. For me, the biggest part would be as I'm walking around the factory and I'm introducing a candidate, I would just introduce them to people on the factory floor. Like, oh, hey, this is Olivia. Hey, this is Steve.
Yeah.
And for me, the character of the person really came through in that couple-minute conversation.
True.
Because I've had candidates where you could just tell they just immediately dismiss the person on the floor, and I'm like, that's not the type of character of person that I want to work with, and so that's incredible. But that's great to actually bring him into the conference room and just watch the interaction. So I definitely learned a lot from this OpsTok already. So thank you, Darren, for sharing that. The only question I'd really like to go back to, because this really resonated with me when you were talking about having long-lasting, sustainable products. So there was one thing my grandmother taught me, and she grew up really poor and lived through really tough times. Well, one of the things they taught me, which sounds counterintuitive, was that we are too poor to have inexpensive things. And what she meant by that was that we can't buy cheap things that are going to break right away. So if it was a pair of shoes, it was no, go ahead and buy the high quality boots that are going to last, because we can't afford to go buy boots every year. And really with your message of building sustainable high performance products, and then the environmental impact just really opened up my mind towards what impact quality can have on the environment. What other advice do you have for manufacturers on how they can build their model in manufacturing to be that sustainable, that environmental friendly? What advice would you give to other factory owners?
That's tough. It's tough because certain companies choose their place in the market, right? And at Rhino, we've walked through over 1,000 companies. We've walked through over 1,000 factories, and so we've seen companies across all aspects of the market. And when I talk about aspects of the market, I'm talking about, are you high volume, low cost, or are you low volume, high cost? When it comes back to, the people that are producing products that are, there's all these terms of like disposable products or engineered obsolescence, which is all very real, right? I think they just have to move away from those products. They just have to literally shut it down, move to a different product altogether. I'm guilty of it too, but every time I use a plastic cup, it just like makes me sick. It's just like, why do we keep on doing this? It seems like the laws are always changing, but nothing actually comes to fruition on that stuff. So it's like, you just have to, I think the manufacturers, the people, we are like in LEAD, we learned it's a three-legged table. You have to have the government, manufacturers, and like the businesses and the people all make a decision together that that's not what they want to do. So, it's what you get caught up in is this circular issue of the people blaming the government and blaming the businesses, or the businesses blaming it on the consumers, blaming it on the government, etc. And what it boils down to is everyone's just got to shift the mentality, and that's done through I think education and other passionate people like myself that are going out and saying that's not good enough, right? Me and my business partners talk, we would never catch ourselves buying a company that manufactures bottles for water. We wouldn't be caught dead doing that. And we even did business cases on that. We had ideas of bringing out different types of water, like maple syrup water, for example, that we had that idea well before it ever came out. We looked into bottling machines, all this kind of stuff. We were like, the environmental impact is way too devastating. Forget it. People can just pour a little bit of maple syrup into a glass of water.
Yeah, to walk away from opportunities because it's against your values. So it's incredible.
Well, and maybe I'll use this forum just to mention a couple of other things, is that the amount of damage that I feel like certain celebrities have had on the environment, Nespresso machines, bottled water, smart water, they're jumping on these bandwagons, making millions and millions of dollars, millions. And the environmental impact is just so devastating. I have like a Fiamma espresso machine that, when I make a coffee in the morning, I just dump out the coffee grinds that go into organic waste. That's the end of it. It takes, it takes 30 seconds more, but there's no waste whatsoever. Absolutely zero waste other than that. Yet everyone, not everyone, a lot of people are using pods and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, I don't know, it is kind of sad. But anyway, everyone's just got to change the way they look at it, I guess. Don't get me started.
No, I was gonna say just here we're gonna probably conclude, but that's a great topic. And one thing you said, education, will bring change and in a positive way. And technology and innovation. I mean, of course, I'm in tech, so that's my agenda. But there are innovative solutions around how do we overcome the environmental impact, whether it's through long-lasting tools, which now I'm going to sidebar to the coffee place. My favorite way of making coffee is my Bialetti, the percolator that I just put the coffee grinds in and boil the water. It's a ritual. It's not the most efficient way of making coffee, but it gets the meditation and the coffee making out of the way. Exactly. And then on the flip side, innovations on biodegradable, disposable stuff, if we need to, if we can't part ways from disposable things. But anyway, I agree with you. Maybe we'll have another conversation around that, but it might be a good place for us to conclude by seeing if there is any final words of wisdom you have for our viewers and ourselves, or if there's any call to action, anything we can do to help our viewers. We really appreciate having you on the show. So we're all open and all ears about it.
I think that we ended on the topic, right? The topic really is, in my value system anyway, is like what's going to be happening in the next generations to come, within in terms of the environment, in terms of the choices we make. It's funny, I was in Cape Town just last week, Sahan knows, for the wedding of Desmond Tutu's granddaughter, and all of the carbon emissions aside, I picked up this book, and it's, I should know the author's name, but basically it says the book is a photographic book of rhinos, right? And I got it for our coffee table, essentially, in our head office. And the title of it is, and the whole theme of it is remembering rhinos, as if rhinos were extinct, right? And so this is a series of books, and I think that it's important for everyone to get their heads into that mentality, because that's what it could really actually look like for our grandkids, for example. So and then people are going to say, well, they'll just genetically make one or whatever it is, or they can go to the museum. I think that there's something to be said, and it goes back to that, respecting beasts and all that kind of stuff. It's like seeing them in their element, even if it's within a national park like Kruger National Park that protects these things. Seeing them in their element is something completely different than seeing, in a zoo, which I think that has its place or whatever, to try to promote the same thing, because now that's kind of what they're all about. But they deserve to have a place on Earth, and humans can be a big part in preserving that and creating a life for other species other than just the human species. So
100%.
That's the message.
Darren, thank you so much for being with us on the OpsTok show.